Long ago, when the universe was nothing but darkness, a dragon emerged. Her scales were near black with a tint of purple to them. She had 2 horns, striped orange and white like a clownfish. Her left horn went straight up and curved back to her head. Her right horn mirrored this, going straight down and curving back to her face. Her ears were like a deer's, but were below her horns and downturned. The insides were orange with gray fuzz connected to the outside, and on her cheeks were the ears connected to her face. She snapped her talons, her orange claws clinking together. The snap created a small sparkle. It grew to an immense size, then disappeared with a loud bang. The dragon watched as the universe began. The stars began to appear, absorbing the heat around her. She snapped her talons again. Another sparkle appeared. Then again with a loud bang, it disappeared. Now planets began to appear. She watched as one close to a smaller star appeared. She flew through the void, landing on the star. She carefully continued the creation of that one planet, adding water and land. She added mountains and lakes, forests and caves, and large fields of open land. Last but not least, she had to add creatures. She added multiple farm animals, cows, horses, pigs, and multiple birds. Finally, she added something she named humans. They had no scales or fur, yet a tougher layer of flesh on top of it called skin. Hundreds of years later, the humans learned to reproduce, yet none of them grew old enough to die. They all lived to be hundreds of years old and wise. She had begun to experiment on creatures like herself, dragons. She created one that was blue like the oceans and rivers. She created when they were new, a slightly muted blue, faded and frosted, but small flecks of gray and black could be seen shifting inside his scales. The dragon of creation spoke, her mouth orange inside. "Stella J, you are my own creation, made in my image. You shall destroy all humans as they reach around 100 years, bringing them to the death plane. Answer all their questions." The new dragon, now with the name Stella J, nodded. He snapped his own talons, sprouting his own horns that were instead deer antlers colored ebony. Around the top point of the 2, a blinding white halo appeared. It sparkled white and light blue, fading between the 2 colors. "If I'm Stella J, then who are you?" Stella J asked, testing out his large wings. He flexed his talons, a small black hole appearing. "Anubis, I am the sun, the whole reason you and the humans exist. There is no singular creature like us. There are lizards, but no lizard has wings. Kill every human that is old and gray. Leave the young ones alone." Stella J nodded and flew off the star towards the planet Anubis called Earth. He landed on top of a tall mountain. He was 3 times the size of their early flying attempts. He slowly shrunk down to the size of a small mountain. A few humans that were walking through the forest near the mountain saw this and began to panic. They turned back towards their village, ready to tell the rest of the humans that they may be in danger. Stella J followed them, flowers and plants being destroyed in his path. Creatures fled at the sight of him, but as they turned, they dropped dead. Everywhere he stepped, death entered the earth. The humans were a few steps ahead of him, running for their life. One tripped and fell, completely in the path of Stella J. He pounced, plunging his talons into the back of the human. He ripped their heart out, throwing it out of the way towards the forest. The 2 other humans stared in horror at the scene, their friend being killed in front of their eyes. They watched as the 2 eyes of the dragon skimmed over them, still young. Stella J prepared to launch, unfurling his wings. With one flap, he was in the air, gliding to the village. As the village went about their day, they watched a giant shadow cover the ground. A few pointed up towards the sky, confused. Mutters began to spread around the village, many beginning to think he was a giant bird. Stella J looked around, his eyes narrowing in on the elders of the village. As he landed, the humans froze in fear. A few began to retreat into their houses. He again quickly pounced on the older humans, this time smashing their heads against the rocks that stuck out of the ground. Once the village was rid of the elders, he flew to the next village. He continued the cycle, killing the elders and sparing the younger humans. As soon as his job was done, he began to return back to the sun. Back in the villages, the humans watched as the sun began to hide behind the mountains, darkness arriving for the first time. New flowers began to bloom, white and pure. Stella J noticed this, interested. He flew back down to the ground to look at these new flowers. As he did, they fully opened, basking in his faint white glow. He reached down and held one in his talons. He gasped as it didn't wilt away. He looked up into the sky and saw a faraway orb about the size of the sun, yet it was white with gray craters. He blinked and clouds covered it until he blinked once more. He let go of the flower and continued to look at the orb. He watched as the stars around it moved into the shape of his mother, Anubis. I have the sun, while you, my son, have the moon. The planet below your talons will stay thriving until the moon rams into the sun, causing an explosion, the stars explained before vanishing once more. Stella J looked down at the velvety flower once more and plucked it. He held it up to his right eye, the stem and root towards his face, then shoved it in. He could feel the roots quickly grow around his eye, absorbing it. He roared from the pain, falling to the ground. His wings tucked over his head, but just a few minutes later, he was fine again. He stood up, his talon reaching for his eye. The flower fluttered under his talons as he touched it. A small smile spread on his face as he lowered his talons. He unfurled his wings and continued back to the sun, but as he did, he noticed the chaos he had created. He stopped and hovered in the sky, watching humans sob over the dead bodies he had just killed. Stella J closed his left eye, the only one that could close now, and flew off. He was still able to see through the flower eye, and he watched as the stars got closer and closer, the sobs of the humans taking over his hearing. Even the rushing wind around him was blocked out. Tears ran down his face, and when the tears hit the grass below, the ground dissolved. He opened his eyes and stared at the growing dead patch. What am I doing? He muttered to himself. He landed on the ground and wrapped his wings around his head. He sucked in a breath and brought his wings to his side. He looked up at the moon and nodded to himself. He stood up and unfurled his wings, which fluttered in the slight breeze that had appeared suddenly. He took one last breath and flapped up to the stars, where the moon was waiting for him, his new home.